Well, it's extremely important that the Fed continue to provide liquidity to the system. They up the amount of so-called repurchase agreements, that is the amount of reserves and liquidity they put into the system, and they need to do as much as the markets want. And the markets are going to have nearly insatiable appetite for that because they're so uncertain. They want to stay really short, really safe, and that's the liquidity that the Fed can provide.
You know, a lot of people are asking me, why isn't now the time for the Treasury to issue tons of 10 and 30 and 50 and 100-year debt? And, you know, if they did that, would the Fed effectively be hoovering it all up because we're going to be at zero and their next step sounds like it's going to be more quantitative easing or bond buying? And isn't that monetizing the debt? I mean, these are really tricky questions, and we're on the precipice here.
No, for sure. I think what you've got to do is have a reason for issuing the debt, not just issue it for issuing's sake. Why are you issuing it? What are you using the resources for? Are you using them to allow taxes to be lowered at least temporarily so people have more money in their pockets, so there are more investment incentives, so there's more expenditure on health care? Those are good reasons to issue debt. If you're just issuing debt for no good reason, that just causes tumult in the markets.
Yeah, so they basically should wait for a plan from the White House that at least then would say, okay, here's the reason why we're issuing this debt. But it does go back to this question of ultimately if the Fed's going to be doing more bond buying in order to expand its balance sheet once we hit zero, which sounds like it could be in 6 weeks or 8 weeks at this point, won't they effectively be monetizing the U.S. debt?
Well, I mean, when the Fed does quantitative easing, purchases a lot of debt, it is buying it. You could call that monetization. When I was there, we didn't call it monetization. They don't call it that now. Usually, that has a bad connotation that leads to high inflation. So far, even though the Fed's balance sheet went from $800 billion to $4 trillion, we've seen low inflation rather than high inflation. So it doesn't have that consequence which usually people associate with monetization.
Yeah, so it does have a bad connotation, but I think people are wondering about, let's put it differently, the moral hazard here. In other words, why not have the U.S. government running massive deficits and racking up huge debts because there's tons of demand for these bonds right now, including from the Federal Reserve?
And so as long as there's a good reason for why you are issuing the debt and you're doing something productive with it and useful for it, if there are good infrastructure projects to put them out to, if you're making sure that credit is available to small and medium-sized enterprise, you're making sure that you're funding unemployment insurance if the unemployment rate to go up, those are all sensible reasons to do it. I think the markets will become uncertain if the Treasury just says, okay, let her rip and let's just start spending for no clear, focused reason. So I think this is a time of, it's important to have a coordination between monetary and fiscal policy.